Leave a healthy person alone in a quiet room, and in about 2 days, their mind will start inventing things that aren't there. Voices, figures at the edge of the room. Not because they were unwell, ordinary, stable people, cut off from everyone for 48 hours, begin to hallucinate. Take away other people entirely, and the brain doesn't simply wait for them to come back. It starts to come apart. And what it does when left truly alone reveals something about human beings we would rather not know. We tend to imagine solitary confinement as simply an absence, a boring, empty stretch of nothing. Unpleasant, sure, but survivable. Just you and your thoughts. The reality is something else entirely, because the human mind was never designed to be alone. And when you force it to be, it doesn't simply wait quietly for company to return. It starts to come apart. And it happens far faster to far more ordinary people than almost anyone expects. We know this not only from prisons, but from experiments. In the 1950s, a researcher named Donald Hebb at McGill University paid healthy volunteers to do nothing. They simply had to lie in a quiet room, with goggles and padding that dulled their senses, cut off from the normal stream of the world. They could leave whenever they wanted, and they were being paid well to stay. Hebb assumed they'd last for weeks. Almost none of them made it past a few days. Within roughly 48 hours, their minds started to rebel. They couldn't think clearly. They became irritable and restless. And then came the truly unsettling part. They began to hallucinate. Ordinary, mentally healthy people, alone in a quiet room for 2 days, started seeing and hearing things that were not there. Their brains, starved of input, simply began inventing it. Now take that and stretch it into weeks, months, even years. That is solitary confinement. A psychiatrist named Stuart Gracian spent years evaluating prisoners held in isolation, and he documented a specific, recurring cluster of symptoms so consistent it earned its own name. He described massive anxiety and panic attacks, overwhelming paranoia, difficulty thinking, remembering, and concentrating as if the mind were dissolving, vivid hallucinations, uncontrollable rage, and its opposite, a flat, hollow despair. And perhaps most disturbing of all, a creeping loss of identity, a sense that the self was quietly disintegrating. This wasn't a collection of people who were already unwell. Isolation was manufacturing these symptoms in previously stable minds. And the damage doesn't stop when the isolation ends. Psychologist Craig Haney, who studied prisoners in one of America's most notorious isolation units, found that many emerged unable to function around other people at all. Some had lost the basic capacity for normal social interaction. The very thing that makes us human had atrophied from disuse, like a muscle left immobilized for too long. And the darkest statistic is this: people held in solitary confinement are dramatically more likely to harm themselves than those in the general prison population. The isolation itself pushes minds toward the edge. This is why, in 2015, the United Nations formally declared that solitary confinement beyond 15 days constitutes cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment, the form of torture. Not the metaphorical kind, the literal kind. People who have endured both physical torture and prolonged isolation have often said the isolation was worse. A beating ends, the silence doesn't, and it works its way into places a fist never could reach. Hostages and prisoners of war have described the very same thing, that being cut off from other human beings was the cruelty that finally broke them, when nothing else could. So here is the question almost nobody stops to ask. Why? Why would simply being alone, no pain, no injury, no physical harm at all, be enough to dismantle a human mind? The answer reveals something profound about what we actually are. Your brain is not a self-contained machine that happens to enjoy company. It is a fundamentally social organ, built by connection and maintained by it every single day. Other people are not a luxury for your mind. They are its calibration. Think about everything other people quietly do for your brain without you ever noticing. They reality test the world for you. When you're not sure if something really happened, you check it against them. They regulate your emotions, calming you when you spiral. They anchor your sense of time through shared rhythms and routines. And most importantly, they hold up a mirror that tells you who you are. Your very sense of self is not something you generate alone in a sealed room. It is reflected back to you, constantly, by the people around you. So when you remove all of them, the mind loses its anchor. Starved of real input, it starts generating its own. And that is where the hallucinations come from. Without others to reflect it back, the self begins to blur and dissolve. Without shared rhythms, time itself warps and stretches. People in long-term isolation often describe losing the ability to tell whether an hour or a day has passed. The mind cut loose from time, drifting with nothing to hold on to. The brain, left utterly alone, quite literally cannot hold reality or itself together, which flips everything we assume about strength. We tend to treat solitude as toughness and needing other people as weakness. We admire the lone figure who needs no one. But the science says the exact opposite. Needing each other is not a character flaw. It is the fundamental architecture of the human mind. The reason you can sit alone right now and still feel like yourself is that your mind is quietly held together by an invisible web of every relationship you have. The friend you'll text later, the barista who knows your order, the family waiting at home. They are, without knowing it, keeping you you. And that carries a strange kind of hope inside all this darkness. Because it means you were never truly a single, separate individual, fighting the world alone. In the deepest neurological sense, you are made of your connections. The ordinary people scattered through your day are not background noise. They are the scaffolding holding up your very self. So the next time you feel that pull toward isolation, to withdraw, to go quiet, to handle everything alone, remember what the mind actually does when it finally gets what part of it thinks it wants. And remember that there are people right now, the imprisoned, the elderly, the forgotten, for whom a single moment of human contact would be a lifeline. We hold each other together most of the time without ever realizing it. That is not our weakness. It is the quiet, astonishing thing that keeps every one of us human. Thanks for watching the Unspoken channel. If you enjoyed this content, feel free to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Until next time.